Hello everyone, David here. Now we are going to listen to podcast news. It includes international news. While walking in the morning or evening, while cooking, cycling or during free time you can listen. Listening improves the quality of communication and comprehension. Before going ahead, I would like to welcome you all to the virtual school. A new way of learning and teaching, with the vision of Let's Grow Together. Our mission is to learn how to learn and teach how to teach. So stay tuned. And here we go. International news. Israeli strikes hit Gaza tunnels as diplomats work for ceasefire. Military says it destroyed 15 km of tunnel used by Hamas fighters to take cover. Soaring tensions, smoke billowing from the port of Gaza City following Israeli bombardment from the sea on Monday. Mohammed Hams. Associated Press. Gaza City. The Israeli military unleashed a wave of heavy airstrikes on the Gaza Strip early on Monday, saying it destroyed 15 km of militant tunnel and the homes of 9 Hamas commanders, as international diplomats work to end the week of fighting that has killed hundreds of people. The latest attacks killed a top Gaza leader of the Islamic Jihad militant group, whom the Israeli military blamed for some of the thousands of rocket attacks launched at Israel in recent days. Residents of Gaza awakened by the overnight barrage described it as the heaviest since the war began. The strikes came a day after the deadliest attack in the current round of hostilities between Israel and Gaza's Hamas rulers, which killed 42 people and flattened 3 buildings in Gaza. Gaza's mayor, Yahya Sarraj, told Al Jazeera TV that the strikes had caused extensive damage to roads and other infrastructure. If the aggression continues, we expect conditions to become worse, he said. The UN has warned that the territory's sole power station is at risk of running out of fuel, and Mr. Sarraj said Gaza was also low on spare parts. Gaza already experiences daily power outages for between 8 and 12 hours, and tap water is undrinkable. Mohammed Thabet, a spokesman for the electricity distribution company, said it has fuel to supply Gaza with electricity for 2 or 3 days. Hamas also continued its rocket attacks, launching them from residential areas in Gaza and aimed at civilian population centers in Israel. The war broke out last Monday, when the Hamas militant group fired long-range rockets at Jerusalem after weeks of clashes in the Holy City between Palestinian protesters and Israeli police. The protests were focused on the heavy-handed policing of a flashpoint sacred site during the Muslim holy month of Ramadan and the threatened eviction of dozens of Palestinian families by Jewish settlers. Call for strike. More protests were expected across the region on Tuesday in response to a call by Palestinian citizens of Israel for a general strike. The protest has the support of Palestinian Authority President Mahmoud Abbas' Fatah party. Since the fighting began, the Israeli military has launched hundreds of airstrikes. Palestinian militants in Gaza have fired more than 3,200 rockets into Israel. The Israeli military, meanwhile, said it struck 35 terror targets on Monday, as well as the tunnels, which it says are part of an elaborate system it refers to as the Metro, used by fighters to take cover from airstrikes. At least 200 Palestinians have been killed in the strikes, including 59 children and 35 women, with 1,300 people wounded, according to the Gaza Health Ministry. 8 people in Israel have been killed in rocket attacks launched from Gaza. Despite international efforts at a ceasefire, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said on Sunday that Israel's attacks were continuing at full force and would take time. Israel wants to levy a heavy price on the Hamas militant group, he said. Hamas top leader, Ismail Haniyeh, who is based abroad, said the group has been contacted by the UN, Russia, Egypt, and Qatar as part of ceasefire efforts, but will not accept a solution that is not up to the sacrifices of the Palestinian people. Egyptian President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi said his government is working to urgently end the violence. Is India's Palestine policy evolving? At UN, India backed Palestine but without any reference to Jerusalem, borders. T.S. Tirumurti. Stanley Johnny. At the United Nations Security Council on Sunday, India, a non-permanent member, reaffirmed its support for Palestine, but stopped short of making any direct reference to the status of Jerusalem or the future Israel-Palestine borders. Wrapping up his over 4-minute-long speech at the Security Council, T.S. Tirumurti, India's permanent representative to the UN, said, in conclusion, India reiterates its strong support for the just Palestinian cause and its unwavering commitment to the two-state solution. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu on Sunday tweeted the national flags of 25 countries, from the United States to Albania, that he said were resolutely standing with Israel and supporting our right to self-defense. Indian flag was not among them. Ambassador Tirumurti's statement made two things clear. 1. He said the violence began in East Jerusalem a week back, referring to the clashes in the Al-Aqsa compound and East Jerusalem's neighborhood. This means, India doesn't see Hamas's rocket firing on May 10, which followed Israeli forces storming Al-Aqsa Mosque in the morning, as the trigger of the conflict. Second, India has expressed our deep concern over the violence in Jerusalem, especially on Haram-esh-Sharif/Temple Mount during the holy month of Ramzan, and about the possible eviction process in Sheikh Jarrah and Silwan neighborhood in East Jerusalem. Dozens of Arab families in the occupied East Jerusalem face eviction by the Israelis, which was one of the triggers of Arab protests in the last week of Ramzan. India has also urged both sides to refrain from attempts to unilaterally change the existing status quo, including in East Jerusalem and its neighborhood. Here, it is Israel which is trying to unilaterally change the status quo by moving to evict the Palestinian families, and deploying troops to the Al-Aqsa compound. India called for the historic status quo at the holy places of Jerusalem, including Haram-esh-Sharif/Temple Mount, must be respected. So, without mentioning any country, India has, in effect, called for the eviction process to be stopped and status quo ante to be restored at the Al-Aqsa compound. Evolving position. While refusing to toe the Israeli line on the conflict, India's comments also point to its evolving position on the larger Israel-Palestine issue. It's a very carefully drafted statement. For example, it's called for the status quo relating to East Jerusalem. But the crucial point that's missing is that East Jerusalem should be the capital of a future Palestinian state. Earlier, this used to be the mantra from India regarding the two-state solution. This portion is now taken out. Therefore, we are simply giving lip service to the two-state solution without mentioning that East Jerusalem is the core part of that two-state solution, said Talmiz Ahmed, a former diplomat who was India's ambassador to Saudi Arabia and the UAE. Until 2017, India's position was that it supported the Palestinian cause and called for a negotiated solution resulting in a sovereign, independent, viable, and united state of Palestine, with East Jerusalem as its capital, living within secure and recognized borders, side by side at peace with Israel. Then Prime Minister Manmohan Singh stated this position in November 2013. So did then President Pranab Mukherjee, in October 2015. India dropped the references to East Jerusalem and the borders in 2017 when Palestinian Authority President Mahmoud Abbas visited Delhi. Prime Minister Narendra Modi said back then, "We hope to see the realization of a sovereign, independent, united and viable Palestine, coexisting peacefully with Israel." I have reaffirmed our position on this to President Abbas during our conversation today. In 2018, when Mr. Modi visited Ramallah, he reaffirmed the same position, with no direct reference to the borders or Jerusalem. Ambassador Tirumurti stated this line while calling for a just solution, without giving specifics on what that solution should be. P.R. Kumaraswamy, Professor of International Studies at Jawaharlal Nehru University, Delhi, said it is the sensible way of saying what is acceptable to both parties. The statement is vague enough while at the same time firmly putting the two-state solution on the table. That's what the point is, whether there is a reference to Jerusalem, whether it is the 1967 border, these are all minor issues. The real issue is this: a two-state solution, coexisting side by side. What are the contours of the boundaries will be discussed, settled, and recognized by the parties, he said. Two narratives. Professor Kumaraswamy, however, added that there are a couple of important nuances in India's statement. First, the references to Haram-esh-Sharif come twice. And it says, Haram-esh-Sharif/Temple Mount. This is a very subtle way of saying that this is not a Palestinian narrative. The Palestinian narrative is that it is Haram-esh-Sharif, that means exclusive Islamic control and ownership. By saying Temple Mount together with Haram-esh-Sharif, it says, the real issue is it is Jewish as well as Islamic. Second, you openly condemn the rockets, but no references to Israeli reaction. Ambassador Ahmed also noted the different approaches India took to the rocket firing and Israeli strikes. There is a specific condemnation on the rocket fire from Gaza, but a similar condemnation is not specifically directed at the Israeli side. And then, there is this loose talk on casualties, but fails to mention the disproportionate use of force by Israel. I think there is a lot of symbolism here. Afghans who helped the US now fear being left behind. 300 interpreters have been killed since 2016. Associated Press, Kabul. He served as an interpreter alongside US soldiers on hundreds of patrols and dozens of firefights in eastern Afghanistan, earning a glowing letter of recommendation from an American platoon commander and a Medal of Commendation. Still, Ayazuddin Hilal was turned down when he applied for one of the scarce special visas that would allow him to relocate to the US with his family. Now, as American and NATO forces prepare to leave the country, he and thousands of others who aided the war effort fear they will be left stranded, facing the prospect of Taliban reprisals. "We are not safe," the 41-year-old father of 6 said of Afghan civilians who worked for the US or NATO. "The Taliban is calling us and telling us, 'Your stepbrother is leaving the country soon, and we will kill all of you guys.'" The fate of interpreters after the troop withdrawal is one of the looming uncertainties surrounding the pullout, including a possible resurgence of terrorist threats and a reversal of fragile gains for women if chaos, whether from competing Kabul-based warlords or the Taliban, follows the end of America's military engagement. Interpreters and other civilians who work for the US or NATO can get what is known as a special immigrant visa under a program created in 2009. Both programs have been dogged by complaints about a lengthy and complicated application process for security screening that grew more cumbersome with pandemic safety measures. U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken said last month that the U.S. is committed to helping interpreters and other civilians who aided the war effort, often at great personal risk. The Biden administration is reviewing the visas programs, examining the delays and the ability of applicants to challenge a rejection. At least 300 interpreters have been killed in Afghanistan since 2016, and the Taliban have made it clear they will continue to be targeted, said Matt Zeller, a co-founder of No One Left Behind, an organization that advocates on behalf of the interpreters. He also served in Afghanistan as a U.S. Army officer. "The Taliban considers them to be literally enemies of Islam," said Mr. Zeller, now a fellow at the Truman National Security Project. "There's no mercy for them." China steps up vaccinations to 14 million in a day. There is a renewed push to immunize people after a resurgence of COVID-19 cases in several local clusters. Anant Krishnan. China's health authorities said the country had administered more than 400 million doses of vaccines as of Sunday amid a renewed push to guard against the resurgence of COVID-19 cases after the reporting of several local clusters in recent days. A record 14 million doses were administered on a single day on Sunday, the National Health Commission said. This follows a stepped-up vaccination campaign that saw the last 100 million doses administered in just 9 days, down from 17 days for doses to rise from 200 million to 300 million and 26 days from 100 million to 200 million. China's vaccination campaign was slow to take off, attributed by experts to a combination of hesitancy and a broader lack of urgency because of the low number of COVID-19 cases in China, which has managed to suppress outbreaks since last summer after months-long lockdown and continued restrictions on international travel that remain in place. Officials sacked. 5 cases were reported on Monday, including 3 in northeastern Liaoning and 2 in Anhui province, which reported 14 cases earlier. The Anhui cases prompted a rush for vaccines in the province, with images on Chinese social media showing long queues braving heavy rains. 5 officials from the 2 provinces were sacked after the emergence of cases, believed to be tied to a port city, the South China Morning Post reported on Monday. Estimates for the efficacy rates of China's vaccines have ranged between 60% and 80% in Phase 3 trials conducted in several countries, but the vaccines have been found to prevent severe cases of COVID-19. The newspaper reported Chinese authorities had approved a 6th vaccine for emergency use last week as it continues a stepped-up campaign with plans to inoculate half the population by the middle of the year. 39 million U.S. families to get child payments. Associated Press, Washington. The U.S. Treasury Department said on Monday that 39 million families are set to receive monthly child payments beginning on July 15. The payments are part of President Joe Biden's $1.9 trillion coronavirus relief package. Nearly 88% of children in the country are covered under the program. Singapore to shut schools as virus surges. Agence France-Presse Singapore. Singapore will close schools from Wednesday as authorities warned new coronavirus strains, such as the one first detected in India, were affecting more children in the city-state. Authorities said on Sunday that primary and secondary schools as well as junior colleges would shift to full home-based learning from Wednesday until the end of the school term on May 28. The announcement came after Singapore confirmed 38 locally transmitted coronavirus cases, the highest daily count in 8 months. Iran to develop Farzad B gas field domestically, dumps India. India's OVL had discovered the gas field in 2000. Kolol Bhattacharya GNEW Delhi. Iran on Monday gave the Farzad B gas field to Petropars, a domestic gas producer. This is a setback for India's energy ties with Iran as ONGC Videsh Ltd, OVL, had discovered the gas field in 2000 and has been part of the ongoing cooperation on that front. According to Iran's news agency Shana, the deal was signed in an event on Monday which was presided over by Iran's Minister of Petroleum Bijan Zanganeh. The deal was signed between Mohammad Meshkinfam, CEO of Pars Oil and Gas Company, on behalf of the National Iranian Oil Company, and Hamid Reza Masudi, CEO of Petropars Group. The Ministry of External Affairs has not yet commented on the development, but OVL had discovered the Farzad B gas field in the Farsi region, which is located between the Iranian and Saudi territories. Monday's deal in Iran comes despite India's long-standing cooperation regarding the gas field and is indicative of the impact of the U.S. sanctions on India-Iran energy cooperation, which had been drastically reduced during the Donald Trump administration in the U.S. Last year, Mr. Zanganeh had indicated that foreign talks on the Farzad B block had become difficult because of the sanctions. Monday's deal will pave the way for daily production of 28 million cum of gas over 5 years, reported Shana. Thank you. Economy. Center sees no impact on AI sale from Cairn suit. It will deal legally after receipt of notice. On the runway, the process has moved to the financial bid stage. Reuters. Jagriti Chandra, New Delhi. The government doesn't see the disinvestment process for Air India, AI, being impacted by the suit filed by Cairn Energy against the national carrier in the US, according to a senior government official. There is no likely impact on the disinvestment process, the official said, speaking on the condition of anonymity. He added that AI would deal with the suit legally when it receives a court notice, noting that the Department of Revenue was overseeing the Cairn case. Lawsuit in U.S. Cairn has filed a lawsuit in the U.S. against AI to enforce the $1.2 billion arbitration award it won against the Indian government in a long-standing tax dispute. After inviting preliminary bids for 100% stake sale in AI, the government has moved to the financial bid stage. The Tata Group is among the multiple entities that had submitted preliminary bids for the debt-ridden carrier's privatization. WPI inflation hits high of 10.5%. Industry frets, urges center to rationalize fuel taxes. Special correspondent, New Delhi. Inflation as measured by the Wholesale Price Index quickened to a record high of 10.5% in April, from 7.4% in March and 4.8% recorded in February, thanks to a base effect from last April which recorded a negative inflation of 1.57%, and a surge in fuel, food, and manufactured goods prices. Wholesale inflation in fuel and power more than doubled to 20.94% in April 2021 from 10.25% in March 2021, while manufactured goods recorded inflation of 9%, prompting industry to urge the government to rationalize fuel prices and try to rein in high commodity prices. Food prices also hardened to record 7.6% inflation in April from 3.6% in February and 5.3% in March. Retail inflation for April had moderated to a 3-month low of 4.29% from over 5.5% in March, helped by cooling food prices, but economists had expected the WPI to harden during the month. The high inflation in fuel and power is significantly raising input costs of Indian industry, said FCI President Sanjay Agarwal. We urge the government to consider petroleum products in the ambit of GST to rationalize the prices and to contain rising inflation, he said. ICRA chief economist Udi Nair said the headline WPI inflation surge was sharper than expected and could rise further to 13%-13.5% in May before winding down. However, core WPI inflation may continue to rise over the next 3 months to a peak of about 10.5% from 8.4% in April. The likely trajectory of WPI inflation supports our view that there is no space for rate cuts to support the faltering growth momentum, even as we expect the monetary stance to remain accommodative, she said. SEBI invites comments on gold exchange regulator floats consultation paper. Special Correspondent Mumbai. The Securities and Exchange Board of India, SEBI, has floated a consultation paper on the proposed framework for gold exchange in India. The proposal was announced by Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman in her FY22 budget speech. SEBI, entrusted with the task of regulating the proposed exchange, including for vaulting, assaying and gold quality and delivery standards, said the existing stock exchanges may deal in electronic gold receipt, EGR, through a separate segment. The markets regulator has also suggested a new exchange exclusively for EGR that would have advantages such as better liquidity and single price reference. As far as transactions are concerned, SEBI working groups have suggested that an entire transaction be divided into 3 CHES. It has been proposed that the vault manager should have a net worth of 50 Indian rupees crore and will be required to furnish security deposits. The consultation paper is open for public comments till June 18 and can be accessed on the SEBI website. Thank you. Thank you so much for watching this video. Do like, share and comment. Press the subscribe button and hit the bell icon to get new notifications. Thank you. Take care and stay safe. God bless you all.